Hey guys, this is BenCB for RazorEdge.com, and as I told you, we take a closer look into some heads-up hands today, or I have to say we'll look in all hands of an heads-up match. Like I said in the first video, the dynamic is very important, and that's why I think it makes more sense to look at the complete heads-up than to look at specific hands. So I would say let's start with the action. When you haven't watched the first part, I would advise you to catch up with it. Okay, the first heads up is against a regular. We have about 10 big blinds effective, and I have a 3-panel HUD. The top panel is for the pre-flop stats, the panel in the middle is for the post-flop stats, and the panel on the bottom is for the limp pot. The most important stats from the first panel are in the second line. The first stats is the small blind VPIP, then his raise small blind stat and his limp small blind stat. Then we have full to 3-bet, call 3-bet, 4-bet range, and full to 4-bet. Then we have the full to steal when he is in the big blind. How much does he call? How much does he fold against the push? And the smaller number, the 32, is how much does he fold against the raise. Then we have his 3-bet stat and his raise versus limp stat. Then in the second panel we have his c-bet stat, then his c-bet fold stat, so how much is he folding to a check raise. Then we have raise c-bet and full to c-bet. Second line we have the same stats for the turn, so c-bet turn, bet full turn, full to c-bet turn, and raise turn c-bet. The third line is the same thing for the river, and the bottom line is donk, fold versus donk, and bet versus missed. And bet versus missed means that when I don't c-bet, how much does he stab. And the last stat is the 1-2 showdown stat. In the third panel are the same stats for the limp pot. I think you can read the abbreviations, and these are self-explanatory. All the stats are filtered for his stack size, so the overall stats are a bit unimportant because we only have 10 big blinds and we can't use too many post-flop stats. And our plan is to play most of the time according to Nash. We can make small adjustments cause he's really aggressive against limps, as you can see. In his post-flop stats we can see that he is very honest. He folds a bunch. So far he folds all the time to a check raise. But pre-flop he is a bit of a station. He raises a lot and he folds very little to 3-bets. He limps some hands, but also doesn't like to limp fold a lot. And you can see that he also defends a lot. He just don't fold too many hands, but then he folds a lot to flop and turn c-bets. So we should adapt in this regard. When we look into the limp pot, here he folds 60% to a bet out of position, and on the turn he folds 100% of the time so far. That's a lot when we look at the single raised and the limp pot, so we should try to play many small pots against him, and we should try to avoid marginal big pots because we have a huge edge against him in small pots. The first hand would be a call. The second hand is a bit more interesting. We can limp, we can push, or we can raise. With his tendencies, I like the limp a lot. I don't know what I've done, but I would like to limp. And he's not that 3-bet active. A very good adaptation is also to raise on the larger side. Very few people make this adjustment. I think between 130 and 150 at max is fine. I would like to see a raise to 35, because I think most people don't adapt to this, so they 3-bet more hands and flat less hands. And with this we generate more dead money, and he folds so much post flop. So I would open raise a bit tighter, and this also allows us mathematically to open raise larger, and I would open more polarized. I would open my very strong hands, so hands like Ace plus and Ace 9 suited plus, Ace 10 offsuit plus, and the strong suited broad raise, and then I would raise trash hands, so hands like 8-4 offsuit, Queen 5 offsuit, and I would complete some hands in between. I think that's a very good adaptation against him. Of course, then our completing range is a bit weak. Yeah, when I think about it and look at his tendencies, I think I wouldn't limp a lot against him. I would rather min raise hands like 10-9 or Jack-10, cause I don't think that he adapts so fast. And when I realize that he plays back a lot to my min raises, then I can readapt. Though I think we have an edge on him when we adjust our sizing. Okay, we raise, but I like the limp a bit more in this spot. Yeah, between 130 and 150 is okay, but I would like 135 more. I think 150 is a bit too huge. A problem on those boards is that he can't have too many hands. Sure, the board is very draw heavy, and against a normal opponent I would always bet my hand, but he has so much trash in his range that we give him the opportunity to catch something on the turn. In this case, he has so much more air hands than draws, so we hope that he improves on the turn. A hand like Queen 10 is often a preflop jam, and we block a Queen 2. Sure, he can have some flush draws, but often he has a hand like King 5, and we hope that he hits his king, or a hand like Queen 2 suited and he hits his queen, so we get way more value. The next point where I check is that he overfolds so much, and that's a problem in this spot. Against most opponents I would just bet flop and then shove turn, and he can call with a lot of worse hands, even with a 9 or with a jack, cause he knows that he's capped, he can never have an ace, and that's why many people here call with the jack or the 9, and that's not the worst idea. And yeah, I checked in this spot, and I think the check is a bit better than the bet in this scenario. When my opponent defends normal ranges, then I would always bet it myself, cause I want to balance my bluffs with some hands, cause I don't want to only bet bluffs on this flop. Sure, we have to bet on the turn, and he folds. Yeah, I think the preflop raise size was not perfect, but I like the rest of the hand. He min raises, and I prepared this for you, that you can see which hands we can reshove when we give him a raising range of 82%. And I know that he is really loose even with very short stacks, and that's an advantage when you play at the higher stakes. There are not so many players, so you know how the other people play, and I already saw very loose open raises with 10, 11, 12 big blinds. Maybe he's a bit tighter than 85%, but I think this is his small blind range. We have to modify this a bit, cause he's shoving the small pockets and the weak aces. But I wouldn't give him too many hands, cause his full to bet is really low, so he raise calls a lot. Then all the suited connectors he can't raise call, he will shove those hands. Then the offsuit and suited kings. Suited queens for sure, and some offsuit connectors. So I think his min raising range is something around 56%. Yeah, I think this looks reasonable. When we look now which hands he is calling with against our jam, then we have all the broadways. Yeah, Jack 10 offsuit is close, but when he raised this hand with 12, 13 big blinds, he's not folding this hand. And we have some history, and he knows that I'm capable of restealing loser. I think this range is realistic, cause he's only limping 12%. When we think that he steals so loose, then we can reshove very loose against him, and 5-3 suited is very profitable. When we discount some hands that he jams preflop, so hands like Queen 7 offsuit, even then we have an AV of plus 0.21. When we make his raise fold gap even smaller, yeah, let's add some hands. Sure, it is possible that he jams most of these hands, and then we can shove any two, cause his raise fold gap is just too high. But I don't think that he does that, cause his fold to three bet is too small for that. He is the type of player that wants to induce a reshove. Also, he limps some very strong hands like queens, kings, aces, and then we can rejam even wider. This is maybe a bit confusing right now, but the point is, when you have an opponent that is really loose in the small blind, especially with 10 to 15 big blinds, so with relatively short stacks, and it doesn't really matter how they construct their ranges, if they limp, if they raise, or if they jam, they are at the one or another point very vulnerable in their range. They're racks which like to induce, so their min-raise range is usually stronger, so their pushing range is really weak, and that's why we can call against the push way looser than Nash. So you always have to try to find the stronger and the weaker part of his range. But when your opponent has a 80% VPIP with 10 to 15 big blinds, and that's not unrealistic for him, with 20 big blinds he has a VPIP of 94, and that's also very easy to exploit. And even with shorter stacks, his VPIP will be around 80%, and I already saw that it's impossible to play this range plus EV, and sometimes we can attack his min raising or his limping range with a 100% range. So in heads up, it is important that you don't only put the hand in the calculator, discount some hands, put some hands in his limping range, play a bit with his ranges. So how much is he folding? How many hands is he calling? So don't only look at the Nash range, always adapt on your opponent. Yeah, I decided to rejam, and I think that's okay. I go with my reads and notes that I have from him. These have always a higher priority than his stats. And he has Jack 10 when he knows that I can resteal very loose. It's a clear raise call. I think when he starts to call hands like Jack 10 offsuit, then I will be rejamming tighter. Maybe he starts to adapt against me. And that's important. When you took the aggressive line and it didn't work out, think about it and note it when you think that your opponent has adapted. I think especially on the low and mid stakes, so many players have huge leaks and they just fold too much against reshoves. They limp too wide and it's very easy to exploit. Okay, now we are a bit deeper. Let's look at the next hand. We have Jack 5 suited. I think that's a pretty clear raise. It's not a polarized hand. And for heads up, it's a solid hand. So the hand is not ultra strong, but it's no garbage either. And I min raise those hands. As I told you, I want to raise the polarized range larger and the medium strange hands smaller. As long as he don't exploit us we exploit him with his defending ranges and his passive post-flop play. And I think it's not a bad idea to defend as wide as he does, but post-flop you have to be more aggressive. You can't fold so many hands, cause we have nearly every spot immediate profit against him. And that's a board which I wouldn't c-bet so light against many opponents. I would check some King X, the strong 9x hands, and hands like jacks, queens that block his straight draws, or a hand like pocket tens. But usually I would go straight for value, but cause he is so passive and he folds so much and we have back to equity, I like the c-bet. Or I would c-bet in hindsight, cause I don't think that he's bluff check raising too much, and we can c-bet many turns when we pick up equity. So he can have hands like 7-4 suited or 7-3 suited to 9-3 suited, all kind of different hands, and that's why I like the c-bet. When you defend a lot of hands passive, cause most sites tell you that you should do that, but when you're unsure how to play most weak hands post-flop and you know that you have a lot of post-flop leaks, you don't have to defend that light pre-flop. I think it's important that you train in this regard, that you defend a bit looser in the one or another spot, but then you have to be aware that you can't overfold post-flop, cause then it's too easy for your opponent. And when you become more comfortable post-flop, you can defend more hands pre-flop, cause many people, let's assume they defend 30% passive and they watch a training video or they get coaching and now they think they have to defend 60% passive. That's just way too much. Just try to increase your range step by step, so maybe every time by 5%, and then try to watch different post-flop spots that you become a better post-flop player. Otherwise you make too many mistakes, cause the difference is just too huge. I think that's very important, so don't hear to all the training videos or coaches that you have to be very loose and you have to defend very loose passive. That's often very counterproductive when this does not fit into your game. Next hand, the stats have adjusted, because now he has under 20 big blinds. So now he has a VPIP of 87%, and even with 19 big blinds, that's way too loose against a solid loose regular. And it doesn't matter how he splits his ranges, if he limps or min raises, a part of his range is always way too weak. So we can rejam a lot, but I have to say his full to 3-bet and his limp full stat is on the lower side when you take into account that he is so loose. Maybe he adapted a bit against me, so he stacks off a bit lighter than usual, so I can't jam any two. Sure, I can rejam looser than usual, but not ultra light. You can see that his full to flop c-bet stat is 75% and his fold to river c-bet is 100%. And in the third panel you can see that he folds 77% out of position in a limp pot. He also folds 100% on the river in a limp pot, so you can barrel a lot against him. Also, the fold to donk stat is 100. He has so many post-flop leaks, so we can exploit him really hard, and that's usually the problem when you want to play such loose ranges. I can imagine that some of you have a similar approach. Maybe they defend looser than they should pre-flop, and then you have those post-flop leaks. So with many c-bets and small pots, we just grind him down. Queen 10 offsuit is a passive defend, cause he's so loose. I would widen my value non all-in 3-bet range. So I would 3-bet a hand like King 10 suited, and then of course call a push, cause we are getting the right odds. But he is so loose and he will call many hands against my 3-bet, and we get value cause he calls with so many worse hands. This is an interesting board. I think many options are possible. As I told you, fold to donk 100, and so far he c-bets very frequently with 100%, and so far he folds 100% to a check raise. So you can donk or you can check raise. I think both options are fine. I donk relatively big because I want to bet my value hands also bigger on this draw heavy board. So don't only use one sizing, try to adapt your bet sizing on the different board textures. Ask yourself, how big do I want to bet my value hands on this board, and then just bet your bluffs with the same sizing. And yes, he folds. You will also have a problem on those boards when he raises this range. He has so often nothing, and when we donk a board like this, we represent that we have something. I think you can donk many hands on this board, so overcard to the board and all hands with backdoor equity. Jack-3 offsuit, I like my sizing. That's what I told you about polarized open raising. So the hands I don't want to play a flop with, but I don't want to fold too many small blind hands cause of his huge post-flop leaks. And that's why I raise this trash hand bigger than a min raise, that I take down the pot pre-flop a bit more often. And cause he folds so much, I can c-bet the flop very often, and then there's more money in the pot post-flop. So the bigger size has a lot of advantages against a player like him. I think every size from 175 to 190 is okay in this spot. What's also important against this opponent is that we don't open 100%. We should fold some hands that he don't thinks that we exploit him, and the same applies to post flop. So sometimes you should check down a hand like 9 high or 10 high on the river, that he can see that we don't exploit him, cause when we destroy this advantage with our aggressive play, cause then he maybe adapts. So now he thinks, oh, he's barreling all the time, this time I call down lighter, and that's so bad for the meta game when we make a sick bluff this time. So it's very important that you don't destroy the edge by yourself, just don't exaggerate. On this flop I think it's definitely a c-bet. Against some players we can check this hand back, cause depending on the sizing we are able to call a turn bet with this hand. But I think the c-bet is better, cause there are so many bad turn cards. So every overcard to the 3 and a spade, and he bets, we can't do anything. Then a 4, a 6 or an 8 is also bad. And even when he bluffs with 2 overs and a gut shot, he has some equity, and that's why we usually have to fold against his range on those cards on the turn. But then we often fold the best hand when he bets the turn, and that's why I really like the flop c-bet. The turn is just a give up. He can have hands like 8-3 suited, and that's why we should just give up on the turn. The river is interesting. I think he can bluff sometimes with a hand like 10-4 in spades, so his flush draws. Some people might hero call in this spot or jam with a blocker to represent the flush, but I don't like it, cause at first he sees that we open Jack-3 offsuit to this sizing preflop, then he sees our call on the river, so maybe this destroys our meta game, and this spot is anyway really close. Always think about the future game against your opponent. This will also has an influence on our EV, and that's why we should fold this hand. Yeah, we have 10-9 suited against many opponents that open raise so loose it's better to rejam with this hand. So the more your opponent open raises, the higher is the EV from the rejam, and when we just call, it's very hard to realize this EV, and when we jam he has to fold too many hands, and even against his calling range we have really good equity. But I think with the history, and he will also raise call hand like Jack 10 offsuit against me, and that's just so bad, and that's why we should flat against this specific opponent. When I would only look at the stats without the history, I would always rejam, cause the EV is very high. Okay, we check the flop, he c-bets, and this time we have a value hand. I think so many people level themselves when we check raise a board like this, cause we could have a draw like 4-5, 4-6, a flush draw, or just a random bluff. And there are a lot of racks which jam ace-4, ace-5 in this spot or the flush draw. So I think a check raise to 290 or 300 is nice. So a bit more than a min raise. Yeah, we check raise and he folds. Oh, now I see. We check shaft. Yeah, I don't like it too much. Maybe I wanted to induce an ace high call from him, cause it looks so much like a flush draw, but I think we should check raise, cause then he can make more mistakes. When we jam he can only call or fold, but when we raise he can click it back or jam himself. Yeah, I mean the push is definitely not wrong, and maybe I had the note that he is stacking off very light with 10 to 15 big blinds. When he has ace deuce, ace 3, ace 4, ace 5 or ace king, ace 10, I don't think that he would fold those hands, and sometimes I see the sickest calls in this spot. But I think you should always check raise this hand. Your opponent has to make very secure calls for that jam. But as I told you, I would like to see a small check raise. Now we have king queen. Yes, a hand I want to open raise bigger against him. I think I would like 180, 190, a bit more. I think 200 is just a bit too large, but I think that 200 is better than 160, cause here's all the leaks I mentioned before. King 7 offsuit, that's an interesting spot. I think we should call. It's a Nash call, as you can see, but when your opponent is so loose and it doesn't matter if they raise or jam, some part of his range will just be very weak. When he has many value hands in his min raising range and he also wants to limp a lot, he also needs strong hands in his limping range. But this means that his pushing range becomes very weak. So there are players which have a balanced min raising and limping range, but then the pushing range becomes very weak, and I want to show you that you should call way looser than Nash. So when we discount all those hands from his pushing range, cause these hands are all in his min raising or limping range, I think ace 9, the strong broadways, yeah, I think this is solid. Instead of calling only king 7 offsuit, we can call now till king 3 offsuit for nearly 14 big blinds. When we think that he completes the weak hands like 5-3 suited, 7-6, 8-7 offsuit, 7-4 suited, yeah, I think this fits. Let's give him ace 9 and king jack 2, and even then we can call till king 4 offsuit. Even a hand like queen 6 suited or jack 8 suited we can call. That's sick, cause not too many people do this. And you see the problem from his very loose ranges. He has to push so unbalanced cause otherwise his limping or min raising range becomes too weak. So you can exploit your opponents really good in this spot. And yeah, we get a bit lucky cause he has king 6. But I think he is shoving all those hands. Hands that are too weak to raise call, but also hands that are an unexploitable Nash push. But unexploitable is relative, cause I exploit his pushing range. Okay, next opponent. This time we have the scenario we play against another regular, but I don't have too many notes and stats on him, so I would just assume that he has a solid standard game plan, and by the given stack sizes we play 70–80% of our hands in the small blind. We want to complete many suited playable hands, so we watch him if he is more on the aggressive or more on the tight side, and we become looser or tighter ourselves, but at first we try to find out how he thinks. 10 deuce suited, I think I like the min raise. The playability is not ultra good and the high card is also not that good. I'm more likely to complete a hand like 10-7 offsuit. I completed in-game. I don't think it's a mistake, but I would like to see this hand in my min-raising range. But it's not a mistake, and of course we bet the flop. This should be standard. Okay, we move on. With 18 big blinds, we have some stats on him. We can see that his ranges are more solid for the stack size. 73 is a good stat for this stack size. He raises, he limps, yeah, he's more balanced. What we can see is that he is very aggressive against limps. Within 100 hands he raised 65% against limps. That's just a lot. And he also defends a lot. We also see that he only folds 27 in the third panel. And he also folds a lot to c-bets. So his post-flop stats are a bit like our first opponent, but he's pre-flop more balanced, so he plays better ranges. We can't call so much looser than Nash against his pushes. Also, we can't re-steal too light, we just play our standard ranges. But I would call lighter against him and also against many racks, cause so many regulars min-raise hands like 10s, jacks, queens, kings, aces, ace-10 suited plus. Yeah, he bets the flop. I think we don't need to look at his stats. We have a pair and a gut shot. This hand should always be a call. We have nearly 100% range and maybe he just tries to fold out our equity, and that's why we call here. We make the bottom straight on the turn, that's why we check call. Against the fish, we can lead a hand like this cause he checks too often with a hand like 2 pair or pair plus flush draw behind. When he is a thinking player and we lead, I don't think he calls worse hands cause we are not getting to the river with a bluff. So we should turn something into a bluff like 7-6, but it's hard, so we should check the river and then we should check call. But it's tough. When your opponent is very passive, you could also check fold this hand, but I think we should always check our hand. I don't think that he's ever bluffing on this board cause we have so many 10x hands in our range and we also have some flushes in our range. Yeah, I think we should check fold this hand, and every regular can think about which hands do we have on the river. We have a hand like 8 and diamonds, so now we have a flush, or we have a hand like 8-9, 8-7, but we are so often check raising, with this hand, so we don't have flop 2 pairs. The only hands we could have is 7-6, 9-6 and 8-6, but cause the cards are already on the board, there are not too many combinations. We have way more 10x hands in our range, Queen 10, Jack 10, even 10 deuce, cause it was a limp pot. That's just so many combos, and that's why we don't need to bluff catch here. And you don't have to think, oh, when I fold my 5 here, I'm so unbalanced. That's just wrong. We have so many value hands that we can check fold a 5 here. Besides that, I think every normal regular don't bluff this river too often. That's why I think this hand is a check fold. His turn bet with Jack 4 is okay, he has a nut blocker to Jack 10, and yeah, we are folding some hands on the turn, like single pairs, and he has outs to the better straight, so I really like his second barrel. I would like to see a raise with Jack 4 offsuit. His 3-bet stats are normal, he also defends a lot of hands passive, and then he folds a lot on the flop. And we have a lot of immediate profit in the spot. I think I already explained it in the beginning from this video. When the stacks are that short, we don't need to raise bigger, cause then it's possible that he rejams more hands. But it would be okay to raise bigger, but as I told you, I don't have too much history with him, and I don't saw any hands he defended passive. So I can only look at his stats, and with our first opponent it was way different, and that's why I also like to min raise our polarized range. When we see that he even defends 4-5 offsuit or 10 deuce suited with this stack size, then I would start to open raise bigger. Yeah, 8-6 offsuit is close against the min raise. I would call 8-7 offsuit. I think 8-6 offsuit, it depends on his post-flop tendencies. Let's look which hands can we jam against his limping range. I think that's also very interesting. Okay, at first let's remove all the hands and then let's just assume a limping range. I had the note that he limps high cards like Queen Deuce offsuit, and then hands that are on the top end of the folding range. So 10-4 suited is a Nash push, then 10-3 suited is a limp. You can construct ranges like that. Then we should give him some broadways like Ace-10 suited, 7-6, 8-6. Yeah, then we have his 20%. So we can push those hands. Cause he's calling his Broadway hands. It makes more sense to push the low suited connectors or the low suited one gapper. 6-4 suited, 7-4, 7-5 suited are better hands to push than Jack 9 suited. That's a bit weird, and that's why you should look into those spots. It just depends which hands he limps with. When he only has the broadways, then it makes more sense to push 6-5 suited than Jack 9 suited, cause then we have more equity against his calling range. But when we discount hands like King Queen, King 10 suited, then we can push very loose. But I don't think that he limp folds so many hands. Yeah, I decided to jam this hand. I really don't like it. I think it's not a good play. Sure, 20% limp is on the higher side. Most players limp between 12 and 15%. I know that he trap min raises a lot, so his min raising range is really strong, but I don't think that this is a good shove. In the best case scenario, it's slightly plus EV or break even if he folds or call. I don't like my push, and I think he called, especially cause he is so polarized in his limping range with hands like Queen 4 offsuit. I also like the raise, cause he's folding those weak hands and we just take it down. But then the price is way better. The risk reward ratio is so much better. When he calls now, we have a very aggressive image. Maybe we destroy our post-flop edge, cause maybe now he starts to adapt post-flop against us. Many people transfer pre-flop decisions to their post-flop game, so they just think I have no post-flop reads on him, but I know that he's a pre-flop maniac, so it is likely that he's also a post-flop maniac. And yes, as I told you, those hands are often in the limping range, and I really don't like it. I think it's not a good play, but this happens. I just tried something and it didn't work, and I learned something, and that's the most important thing, that when you played badly, you learn something out of it. King 9, standard jam and standard call from him. Here we have a complete. I want to limp some hands with the stack size, cause you don't need to push anything, but he has a very high raise versus limp stat, and I wanted to test if he jams a lot when the stack sizes are very low, and that's why I put King Queen into my limping range. And I would put more hands than usual in my limping range, and especially value hands. But unfortunately he has the same hand, very standard. So this was an adaptation by me against his high raise versus limp stat. 65 on 100 hands is really high. I think he's just really aggressive in this spot. I don't think that's just variance. Queen 7, standard Nash push. King 3 is a close Nash call with the antes. When we think that he limps or min raises aces, kings, queens, then we can call a bit lighter. And as we remember, we could call king 3 offsuit for 13, 14 big blinds earlier, and here for 10 big blinds or a little below 10 big blinds. As we can see, it's a close call by itself, and when we discount aces, kings, queens, ace queen, ace king suited, yeah, we see it's an easy call. It is possible that some weak hands are also in his completing range, so let's make his range a bit tighter. Then slightly minus EV, and that's the worst case scenario. Often they min raise or complete ace queen, ace king, king queen, and some people also min raise or complete their ace jack and ace tens, and then the king 3 is so plus EV. So this is just worst case, that he just limps queens plus, and then it's marginal minus EV. Under normal circumstances, it's plus EV. So we should call, and he has queen 6 offsuit. And as we talked about it earlier, this hand is too weak to raise call with. So now let's set our calling range against him. I just want to show you the case when someone is pushing with capped ranges. So we take the discounted hands in his min raising or in his completing range, and we call this range. So any king, queen 7 offsuit plus, 10-9, 9-8 suited, so every hand that is plus EV. And then you can see that hands that are usually a Nash push are now not a Nash push anymore. And that's usually the problem when your pushing range is capped, because then the weak part of the pushing range becomes minus EV when your opponents adapts against the loose pushing range. I want to show you the case when someone has tens and ace queen offsuit in his min raising range. Then it's even sicker, and I would call even lighter against those people. Then many jams become minus EV, and you should be aware of that. That's very important. 4-5 offsuit is a clear fold. 6-8 for 3.5 big blinds is a call. Jack-7 is a clear push. 2-4 is a clear push. And Jack-9 is a clear push. Except for the 8-6 hand, we played very solid and made good adaptations. Okay, let's move on to the next heads up. We play against another regular, but he's an unknown in heads up sit and goes. There will be some stats and I have some notes from the early game, but I have no infos about his heads up game. So we just play our standard game plan. Jack-6, we should check. We could raise and then watch what he's doing, but the check is also fine. On the flop, I think check call is the best line. When we check raise, I think against the solid rack we isolate ourselves against the stronger range. The turn is interesting. Of course, we should call again. He can value bet worse, or he just has a draw. But his sizing is a bit strange. Most regulars size this turn bigger, cause the board is quite draw heavy, and that's why I think we can discount two pairs over pairs sets and the straight. I think now it's also okay to check raise, cause then he often levels himself into calling, and with his sizing I think we can discount many hands, and many racks are very unbalanced in this part. He bets under half pot, and that's why I like the check raise, cause I don't think that he ever bets that small with a strong value hand. This card improves so hard our range. We have 10-7, 10-4 suited, 10-9, Jack-9, Jack-8, 8-7, 10-8, 4x with a flush draw, so he should bet bigger. Okay, now the stats are there, but we just have 13 hands, not too many, and that's why I think it's okay to check raise the turn to 400, and then depending on the river to jam. We can have some draws like 6-5, 8-6, spades, 4x with a spade. I think this play is also nice when we peeled king 4 or queen 4 or 4-5, 6-4, 8-4, and now we have a spade draw to it. I'm totally fine with turning this hand into a bluff, cause I think the small size is not very often a bluff, cause he generates not too much full equity with his small sizing. But I decided to call on the turn, that's also okay. The river is tough. I think we could lead, cause we want to lead some hands like 8-6, 6-5, and a few flop floats that turn the flush draw like king 5, King 8 in spades, and we have the 4 in spades. And I think it's valid to value bet a jack now. It just depends how you want to construct your ranges. But I want to bluff my 6-5 now, and that's why I would also value bet some jacks. His river bet is a bit strange, cause it makes no sense. He just bets the turn so small, or relatively small, and now he bombs the river with 75% pot. I decided to fold my hand, and I don't think that he was bluffing on the turn that often, cause I think when he has a draw he will size it bigger on the turn, and I think that he can play a strong jack this way. And some people have huge bet size leaks. What's also important in this spot that the board changes not too much. So when we call the flop and the turn, we have many Jack X hands in our range and a few 4x with spades. So on the river we have most likely top pair or trips. We can have the straight 9-8 and we have some second and third pairs, cause he bets this huge, we don't have to defend that much. When he bets only half pot on the river, we call for sure, but so he gives himself a worse price on his bluff, and we don't have to defend as many hands as when he bets just half pot. And you should be aware of that, so when he bluffs bigger, you can fold a few more bluff catcher hands, and I think on an undynamic board like this, so no overcard was there on the turn or on the river, it is less likely that our opponent bluffs a lot. When the board is very dynamic, so the turn and the river are two overcards, so when we have top pair or second pair on the flop, we only have third or fourth pair on the river. And the regulars know this and will barrel more often on those board textures. But on this jack high board, it is less common to bluff too often, especially on the low and mid stakes, and you can really make a lot of money in those spots. So don't call too many hands down. 10-7 offsuit, I don't know why the hands take so long to load. I think I would have defended this hand against the min raise, but it's close. I think folding is also fine. I would call 10-8 for sure. 10-7 I would look in the note window at first. When he's more on the aggressive side, I would fold this hand, and when he's more on the passive side, I would call this hand. I think with King 8 we have some options, but I wouldn't limp this hand cause it plays post flop not too well. I think a jam or min raise call is fine. We shouldn't min raise fold for 12 big blinds. I think long term we would lose too much money. He can re-steal some worse hands and we get too good odds, and sometimes we can induce something with the min raise. This may sound strange, but a lot of players rejam any suited king and the suited broadways. Sure, all ace-x hands and the pockets too, but overall we have the equity to make the call. So when you have an aggressive restealer, you can raise call this hand. Ace-jack suited, I would raise, but I think we can put this hand also in the completing range. It just depends how you construct your ranges. My sizing is on the smaller side, and I think it's okay cause I want to induce something, and my sizing looks very weak on this draw heavy board. I want that he jams with a hand like 8-6 or 9-8, and we perform very good against those hands, but unfortunately he folds, Some players just go crazy when you bet this small, and I just wanted to test it. I'm not playing standard all the time. I test how they react to very small sizings on a board like this. Then you get a better feeling how your opponent thinks than when you just play your standard game. That's why I like the size, and I want to size my bluffs also smaller, because I think when he has a draw, he's just check jamming. Most people just jam, cause our size is not that important on a board with this stack to pot ratio. It's a different story when we have more stack behind. Then I would size bigger, cause I also want to size my draws bigger, cause the board is very draw heavy. King 10 offsuit, he completes. I would just jam. Raise is also okay, cause we give him the opportunity to spaz out. Yeah, I like it. And he can call a lot of worse hands. King 10 offsuit doesn't play that bad post flop. I give myself the edge and the equity advantage. Okay, the edge is not huge out of position with 10 big blinds, but we have the equity advantage. Sure, it can be tough post flop, but I think long term it has a higher EV to raise this hand. Cause many players make now the mistake and call too loose against my raise, and we dominate his connectors 10-9, 10-8, Jack-10, and that's why I like my raise. We should check this flop. I think we can check a lot on a board like this. At first, it's important to look for which player is this board better. Sure, we can have all the overpairs, but he has more nutted hands. So hands like 10-8 suited, 8-7 suited, 8-4, 8-5 suited, Queen 8 suited, maybe 9-8 suited too. Some players complete this hand, it's possible. He can also trap aces and kings, and he can have a lot of draws. It just makes no sense to bet. He's not folding a better hand, and ace high is not in his range. Sure, some worse hands call like 7-6 or Jack-10, but those hands have a lot of equity and often they bet anyway when we check. So I like the check call on this board. It also depends on his sizing. Also, when we bet and he jams, we have a super ugly spot. He can jam so many draws, but he also has so many mate hands. He can jam his 9 to get an ace high call. Against this size, we call the flop. The turn is super interesting. It improves our perceived range a lot. I would check fold my hand on this turn, cause when we check call the flop, we have perceived all ace high hands in our range, and we should check. I don't think that he bluffs very often with 7-6 or Jack-10. I think he's often taking the free card cause he knows that he has very few full equity. The river gives us a 10, and I think he can have some 8x hands, but I think most of the time he's betting cause the ace improves our range so much. And that's why I think he has very often a hand like 10-9, Jack-10, Queen-10, 10-7, 7-6 also gets there. That's a bit ugly. I think checking is okay, but then it's a check fold, cause I don't think that he's turning a 9 into a bluff. A value bet is close on this board. We should bet very small, and we have to size so small cause he's not calling worse hands when we bet bigger. We should bet under 1/3, yeah, 1/5 pot. Then we give him the option to call his 9x hand. But I think it's a mistake to call 9x in his shoes, cause when you think about our range, so we either have an ace or a 10. and he called with 9-5 in hearts. Yeah, I don't like it. I think it's a bad call. So even when we bet a hand like King 9, he's behind. When he had Jack 10, it's a better call than his 9, cause we could play King 9 this way. But 9-5 is a sick mistake. With which hands can we bluff on this board? Not too many hands, just King Queen or King Jack, so not too many bluffs. He don't have to be right that often, but I don't think that he will be correct in 1 out of 7 times. Okay, let's move on. Pocket Queens, standard push. Jack 5, standard call. He has Ace 10. Pocket 3s, standard push. 7, 8 is a call for 4 big blinds. Here's King 10. 8-3 suited, I think it's a good complete. 8-4 suited is a clear Nash push, so we can put 8-3 suited in our completing range. I think that's legit, but he jams, we can't do anything. Ace 8 suited is a clear jam, and we hit the nuts right away. Yeah, and now we are on the end of this video. A little bit longer than I expected. What's very important is that you review the whole heads up. Sure, you can look at specific hands when you want to calculate something, but when you want to work on your heads up game, pick a heads up game in which you had some problems or against racks which are very good, and then look at all the hands. Then you will learn a lot. Or sometimes against the fish, that you play max value against them, that you don't have leaks against them, so against different player types. It's also important that you have the right game plan against the different player types. And it's important to estimate the tendencies from your opponent. So is he aggressive? So that you know which hands do you want to open raise, which hands do you want to complete to min raise, how do you want to deviate from your standard ranges. And that's why it is super important to look at the different player types and to work on your game when you review the heads up. How would you play against a different player type? Don't play your standard game plan all the time. There are a lot of very good set and go players which have a very good overall game plan, but they are very bad in heads up because they don't adapt well enough against the different player types. When they play a standard game plan against every opponent, they just lose so much against aggressive or very passive opponents because they don't get the maximum out of it. And other racks with a worse overall game plan, but they adapt very good against different player types, can have a way higher win rate in heads up. That's just so important. To summarize it, when you have very aggressive racks, look which ranges are vulnerable. When he min raises and completes a lot, so his value hands are in his min raising or in his completing range, then you have to call very loose against his jams, so exploit him very hard with this. And when his jams are very strong, you can rejam very light against his min raises, or you can play back a lot against his limps. When you have a tight rack, you should rejam less hands and flat more hands. So look which ranges are vulnerable and don't exaggerate it, cause in the heads up the other player will notice it very fast. So when you have an aggressive opponent and you make some weird play, you might destroy your future game with that. Cause, oh, what did he do? Does he try to exploit me? Then he starts to review his heads up play and you destroy your whole edge. Or he overfolds a ton post flop and you make a sick move and he notes that and then he calls you down all the time. So he becomes a calling station against you and you just destroyed your whole post flop edge. So yeah, as I told you, just don't exaggerate it, especially in sit and goes. This is the spot in which players overadapt as fast as possible. I can tell you this from my own experience and with talks to other regulars. So a regular sees one bluff from another regular and they overadapt way too much. They call way too late down after this bluff, but it was just in the standard game plan from the opponent. So be aware of that, and the most people underestimate this fact, but I can tell you this from my own experience. So don't make the same mistakes. That's so important. Yeah, I hope you learned a lot from this video. I wish you a lot of fun by reviewing your heads ups. And I say goodbye and I see you next time. And this was BenCB for RazorEdge.com.